All right, last week, I believe we left off with ready to start verse 12, but just by way of getting our feet wet again. Look at verses 10 and 11 just real quickly here. Verse 10, you felt secure in your wickedness. You said, no one sees me. Your wisdom and your knowledge led you astray. And you said in your heart, I am, and there is no one besides me. I think we understand that pretty quickly as an arrogant attitude that's being described there. I am, and there is no one besides me is a picture of someone who doesn't feel like he has anyone to answer to, who has freedom to do whatever he chooses. Always a frightening sort of picture. Verse 11, but evil shall come upon you, which you will not know how to charm away. Disaster shall fall upon you, for which you shall not be able to atone. And ruin shall come upon you suddenly, of which you know nothing. The disaster word here is the same Hebrew word that's translated in verse 10 as wickedness. It's ra'ah in Hebrew, and it is, when you learn Hebrew vocabulary, the word that you use there is wicked. So it's wickedness that's being talked about. So they have chosen wickedness, and it is wickedness which shall come upon them, evil and evil. The disaster to come upon them will be unannounced, of which you know nothing, inescapable, you'll not be able to atone, and unprecedented, you'll not know how to charm it away. It's not anything you have seen before or know how to deal with. So it's a frightening picture of an evil that's coming upon them. So verse 12 actually starts another little section here, and it will talk about their failed religion. So verse 12, stand fast in your enchantments and your many sorceries with which you have labored from your youth. Perhaps you may be able to succeed. Perhaps you may inspire terror. So enchantments combines the sense of association with supernatural powers and the controlling of the future. This is what they hope to be able to do through their manipulation of supernatural powers. They want to be able to control the future. Sorceries are the incantations used in this false religion. Picture the witch standing beside the cauldron, double toil and trouble. Succeed. Perhaps you may be able to succeed, and that's sort of a biblical word. We need to understand it in a biblical way. It is the idea of profit. It's the idea of gaining substance and constancy and being a person of gravitas, weight, substance. So it's the Lord is telling them here, go ahead with your enchantments. Let's see if you are able to succeed. Perhaps you may inspire terror. And so succeed includes the idea of profit or it isn't really money kind of wealth. Rather, it's the kind of success in life that fulfillment, if you will. So inspired terror is one who is able to dispel any threat. They're able to scare away anybody that might threaten their substance. So Isaiah poses the question about whose word will prevail. Is it these enchantments and these sorceries that are going to provide profit? Or is it some other word that will prevail? And so verse 13, you are wearied with your many counsels. Let them stand forth and save you, those who divide the heavens, who gaze at the stars, who at the new moons make known what shall come upon you. In verse 12, the previous verse, they wish to know the future. Here they want to control the future. It says to know the future. Here they're attempting to control the future. Sorry about that. A real God, after all, knows the future and brings it to pass. And so that's what they're hoping to accomplish. The real Lord of history promises to save his people in the midst of the events of history, rather than saving his people from the events of history. That's a distinction that it's easy to say those words. I think that the things in the Ukraine maybe offer us a chance to think about that in a fresh kind of way. I saw a tweet this morning from a president of a theological seminary there in Odessa in southern Ukraine. He said that he sent away the students and faculty that had young children. He sent them to a place of safety. He said, but everybody else has stayed, and they are planning to carry on as usual until the enemy shows up at their doorstep, at which point they will turn to fight. They don't expect for the Lord to stop the problems around them, to change the onslaught of the Russians, but they do expect that in the midst of it, they can trust the Lord. It's a kind of faith that looks beyond the grave, if you will. It's a kind of faith that trusts the Lord, even in the worst of circumstances, even with the prospect of an imminent death. They're trusting the Lord. That's I think that's a lot easier to talk about than it is to live out. And yet it is the faith that we're called to. That's the hope that we talk about when we talk about our Christian hope. We aren't talking about something that we wish will come to pass. We're talking about something that we know is in our future, something that we trust is there for us in the future. Calling it hope, I think sometimes misleads folks who aren't familiar with our Christian jargon. And I think we might be better off to say trust. This is what I trust in. This is what I believe is going to happen. This is what I know is my future. And so that's the kind of trust that we're called to. That's the hope that we really have. That's the knowledge that we should carry with us that causes us to say and do the things we do. It's what should motivate our lives. So verse 14, behold, they are stubble, the fire consumes them. They cannot deliver themselves from the power of the flame. No coal for warming oneself is this, no fire to sit before. Such to you are those with whom you have labored, who have done business with you from your youth. They wander about, each in his own direction. There is no one to save you. And what's pictured there is the outcome of the false religion. Isaiah God through Isaiah is saying to them, these that you have trusted from your youth, these that you have carved and formed and cast and that you carry about in your processions, that you like to place up on a place and nail them down so that you can worship them. This is what they will provide for you as the fire comes, as the danger looms. They are worthless to you. They will wander off in their own direction. Last thing you want to see is if you're a Ukrainian hiding in the subway, the last thing you want to see is your army dispersing, everybody off in his own direction, wandering into the woods. That's the picture that's painted here. That which is intended to, that which they believe will protect them, is of absolutely no use when the danger comes. So there is no profit, no success, no fulfillment in this false religion. You have done this since your youth, yet there is no salvation there for you. These that you have trusted wander about with no intent, no desire, no purpose to save you. They're wholly consumed by their own thoughts, their own motives, their own ways. And so that's kind of a frightening picture. So what these 15 verses of chapter 47 have been about is the Lord's retribution on Babylon. Remember, we talked about the fact that Babylon is falling. Pictured here, the false religion, the Babylonian Empire, the Babylonian way of life that had conquered God's people and brought them into captivity and had treated them worse than the Lord's discipline of them demanded. One of the things that we ought to do as we walk through this is to get to know the Lord a little bit better, is to be able to say in your heart of your God, this is what he will do. And so here is a picture. He has sent his people into captivity because of their faithlessness. Moses had predicted it clear back in when they were still wandering in the wilderness. Moses had predicted their captivity, but they were sent there not just to punish, but rather the Lord's purpose in sending them to Babylon was that they would turn to him. It is a redemptive purpose. His purposes are always redemptive. And so God's people and feel the weight of that, because you are God's people. God's people were sent into captivity because of their faithlessness. The nation who took them into captivity was not anyone they would have expected. This was an evil people as far as God's people were concerned. Babylon was a horrible enemy. Babylon was not someone they would have chosen to discipline them. So Babylon took them into captivity. The Lord is working to get their attention, to get them to turn to him. In the meantime, Babylon goes beyond the Lord's purposes for his people. And so the Lord here in chapter 47 speaks and says, because you have treated my people badly, because you have gone beyond my purposes for them, you will suffer. You will be disciplined. And yes, the Lord would love for them to to respond to him in faith. You don't hear many hints of that in chapter 47. You don't hear much expectation of that. But we know, don't we, that that's what the Lord's heart desires for them, that they turn toward him. But in the meantime, he will bring justice. It's not the justice that if you were an Israelite kid who got to march 600 miles through the desert to get to Babylon, it's not the justice you would have wanted. It didn't come at the time that you would have wanted it. It didn't happen in the way you would have wanted it. But in fact, God did bring justice. And so he even says here that he will seek vengeance. God is going to get retribution for the ways in which his people have been treated. So his people are very much his people. You don't get to mistreat his people and get away with it. That doesn't change the way his people experienced captivity in Babylon, does it? They walked through some very difficult days. Some of them died in the war with Nebuchadnezzar. I mean, this was not an easy time for the nation, but they had turned away from the Lord. And he loves them enough that he will not let them go away without him calling them back. Would that I were such a perfect father. The idea that he's going to now discipline those who have mistreated his people sits very well with me. I feel good about that. I don't feel good about the suffering that God's people have endured. And yet it was necessary for them to turn back to him. And so what am I learning about my God here? He has real purposes, doesn't he? He does intend for things to be his way. It is the world he created, after all. And he will have his way in it. He is sovereign. He is sitting on that throne. And in all the ways of the world, in all of the events of the world, it is, in spite of all of the evil and the fallenness in nature and in the hearts of the people around us and in our own hearts, in spite of all of that, God is working and will accomplish his purposes. That's good news. That's a reason to rejoice, even if I have to suffer a little while on the way. I'm going to stand face to face with Jesus one day. I'm going to be like him one day. For a long, and we want to say the word time there, don't we? But there is no more time. I'm beginning to learn a little bit about God here. So let me move on now to chapter 48 and stop this share and start a new one. Chapter 48 is a turning point chapter. This is, as you can see here, this is the chapter 48 is the last chapter of the Cyrus section. So we're going to make a transition now to the servant section, and it's a glorious transition. I've been waiting for this for 48 chapters, and I can't wait to get to chapter 49 and beyond. But in this chapter, a couple of things are going to happen. First, we're going to we're going to see a problem solved. We're going to see the final solution to the first of the two problems that Israel has. And by now you're real familiar with the two problems. Number one, they're no longer in the land. They're captive in a foreign land. And number two, they can't have sticking with number one for just a second, they can't have a righteous king reigning over a righteous people when they aren't even in the land where the king's supposed to reign. They can't have a righteous king sitting on a throne, which doesn't exist at the moment in Jerusalem. So they need to get back there for Isaiah's and God's prophecies in the early part of this book to come true. Isaiah has the answer to those things that he promised, right? He says there's a king coming, a righteous king who's going to sit on the throne and reign over a righteous people forever. Well, the first problem is there's no throne. There's nobody there to reign over. They certainly weren't righteous when they were there. And there's no king there to see. So the first problem that has to be solved is you have to get back to the land. So that's the first problem. And it's the one that is going to be solved by Cyrus. That's the point of this Agents of Redemption section here. And Cyrus is the one who will liberate them from captivity and send them back. That's the first of their problems. The second of their problems is somewhere we got to find a righteous people for that righteous king to reign over, right? We don't have, where's the righteous people? Israel is in captivity in Babylon because they're sinners, because they're a sinful people, because they turned away from the Lord, because they're not the righteous people that this king will get to reign over. That's a real problem, isn't it? That's a problem that no matter what happens, these people can't solve themselves. And so we're going to see this in this final chapter of the Cyrus section. We're going to bring to conclusion Cyrus sending the people back. And the last statement in this chapter kind of comes on you with out of nowhere. But the last statement in this chapter is, but there is no rest for the wicked. Oh, the wicked, we haven't solved that problem yet, have we? That's the problem that is going to be raised in the last part of this chapter. So, having said all that, maybe Bob, you can move on to start talking about what it actually does say. Verses 1 through 11 are the first section in this chapter. 12 through 22 is the second part. You can see that there's parallels here. This is typical Isaiah. He doesn't do anything without organization. In the first part, Israel is described. In the second part, the Lord is described. In the first part, former things are described. In the second part, the Cyrus plan, which is the former things, are confirmed. In the first part, the new things are presented. And in the second part, it is the servant who is confirmed and described. The servant is the new things that are going to be talked about in this chapter. This first section ends with the Lord's motives. The second section ends with the Lord's actions. This is why he's doing it. This is what he's going to do. And so you can see that the organization here, the incredible structure of the book of Isaiah. I wish I could spend some time with you developing outlines of the whole book of Isaiah. What you end up with is one big outline, and the first section of that outline has an outline of its own. And each section of that outline has an outline of its own. And each section of that outline has an outline of its own. This book is so structured. It is so incredibly put together. And you end up with such a gigantic message. The message is all the way from the end of the Davidic dynasty, because of the sinfulness of the people, to the New Jerusalem, where the new king, the new righteous king, is reigning over a righteous people, and there is glory. That's the breadth of the book. And along the way, every part of it fits into the structure. When you get to see it from 35,000 feet and you see it like that, sense that you get is that though I don't understand God's plan, God's actions in history, though I can't understand all of this in the structure that's presented, it is very much God working out his purposes. There is a plan. There is a grand plan, and it really is being worked out item by item by item by item. It is really stunning when you can get that picture of the organization and the purposefulness of this presentation that Isaiah makes. It is just breathtaking to see that God is in fact, whether you see it or not, whether you understand it or not. And I've come to the conclusion that I can't understand it most of the time, but I can trust it. And that's what this book is about, is for us to understand that God has a grand plan and we can trust it. When Isaiah presents the servant who's going to die to atone for our sins, what an incredible prophecy that is. When I look back at the cross, when I read Isaiah and then I look back at the cross, there is nothing about Isaiah's picture of the servant that isn't fulfilled in the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus Christ. There is nothing that Isaiah says that doesn't come to pass in the life of the servant, in the life of Jesus. How should that make me feel about the promise that I will one day stand face to face with Jesus and I will be like him? There is nothing. I want to tell you with confidence. I want to tell you with boldness this morning that every promise that's made to you in the New Testament is going to come to pass in every single detail. You are going to stand face to face with Jesus and you're going to be like him. That's why I say what I say, do what I do, and believe what I believe. That's why I show up to worship every Sunday morning. That's why I make the decisions that I make as a Christian man. That's what motivates me to be who I am in a world that really doesn't care to hear from me.
Bob,
Hi, Mike.
Yeah, good. Well, this study, these truths here add so much to the New Testament scriptures that we all know. He who has begun a good work in you will continue to perform it until the day of Jesus Christ. We know the facts of that. We believe it, but this is just seems to make the foundation of it all that much thicker and stronger.
Yeah,
Thank you.
This is a guy who's had a plan for a long, long time. He didn't just drop Jesus out of heaven when things got just right. He had planned it all. Wonderful counselor.
Well, I have a question. How come that all of this is so clear to us and we are so comfortable with it, And yet the vast majority of people, who I know at least, cannot even be loosely approached. The surface cannot be scratched with any of these topics. That
Yeah.
is so disappointing. Do you have any solutions to that?
Solutions I don't have, Heinz. I can tell you that the Bible describes the condition of those people in several different ways, in multiple ways. Among those are they have a veil over their eyes. They're unable to see. Their lives are ruled by one who has deceived them. Their lives are ruled by one who wants to destroy them, by a lion who prowls back and forth in the world looking for whom he may devour. It is the fallenness of the world that creates the kind of world where they exist as they do. It's heartbreaking, and I know that you experience it, Heinz. It is heartbreaking to not be able to share the joy of this with people that we love, people that we care about. And so God has
just
given.
saying we just throw the towel, give up.
Oh no.
Well, then what can be done? I mean, in all my life, in any situation, to identify a problem, analyze it, is wonderful. But I was always dissatisfied if we did not leave the problem with a clear action, a credible action plan, how to get done what we perceive as right.
Yeah. Jesus has left us with that action plan, Heinz. It's called the Great Commission. We are to go into all the world, creating disciples and teaching them how to do the things of the Lord. It's we must share with people the truth about what we believe. Some of them will respond. Some will not. There is a reality of people refusing the Lord. That happens. But we must make every attempt to make him an option in people's lives. We must present him and present the truth in a way that is appealing to the world around us. The guy who mentored me when I was a new Christian said that what he wished I was, and he was always telling me what he wished I was, and he was right to do it. I needed a lot of work when I was a new Christian. But what he would always say is, what I want you to be is so doggone appealing and winsome and charming and delightful. I want you to be such a wonderful person that everybody in the world wants to know why. Everybody in the world wants to know what motivates you. Everybody in the world wants what you've got so that they can feel the way that you clearly feel. There's a lot to do, Heinz, and unfortunately, I see it as unfortunate. I suspect you will as well. Unfortunately, we can't create a game plan that will always succeed. We can't cause someone to be saved. What we can do is cause them to see what it has accomplished in our lives and hopefully make them want what we've got.
And we've been saved We've been saved to give God glory. Second to that is the fact that we benefit from salvation. He wants us to worship him, and his word doesn't return void. And I think of the many people. I got an older sister, younger brother. I can't stop praying for them, but it's like talking to a wall. But his word doesn't return void, and I have to look beyond the fact that I dearly love to see them saved. I know what they face, but God says his word will not return void. And that's what I cling to.
Yeah, Heinz, I understand, your question, and I'm frustrated too. And I wonder, there's people I know who they have biblical wisdom, or I'm not sure if that wisdom is the right word, knowledge. And it's like, why are you not following it? But and that's where I understand it. It's there's not just knowledge, there's the heart issue. They have to choose. And why do they not? That's the baffling part, and I don't know either. I know some who have had the exact same or virtually the same education as me, and they just have views that are just bizarre. They're just, the Bible's kind of interesting, but they look at all these other things that are more interesting, and they think they're more worthy. It's like, well, all right. There's no basis for that, for believing in those other things, but they do believe in those other things. It's like, oh, okay. Yeah, and that's where, what Bob was saying, it comes back to the power of the word. And or sorry, actually maybe Mike was saying, the word doesn't return void. It's we sow the seeds of God's word, and we think, well, it didn't do anything, but we don't know till
Sometimes we don't have the patience to see it come to be.
Our ministry in Austria, it's 90% more Muslims, and we only see them sometimes for 2 weeks or 2 months, and then they're gone. Well, from a logical and let's say business standpoint, we're worthless. You only have a short amount of time. We hope that they come to us because we can't really go to them. But no, we by faith know, and we do see fruit that reminds us, no, they're hearing, they're understanding part of the truth at least, and later we don't know what happens, but we know that is powerful. So
I suspect that's pretty unsatisfying as an answer, Heinz, but it's the best we've got.
Okay.
But we all share in it, Heinz. We all have those loved ones and friends that are in those conditions.
Yep. So charges are leveled against Israel in verses 1 and 2 of this chapter. Charges are developed in the context of the former things and the new things. And then the secret behind all divine dealings with Israel is revealed in verses 8 through 11. Don't you love that kind of statement? Everything will be revealed.
If you can understand it.
Yeah, if only. So verse 1, chapter 48, verse 1. Hear this, O house of Jacob. So now who's being talked to? He's turned from talking to Babylon. Now he's talking to Israel, who are called by the name Israel, who came from the waters of Judah, who swear by the name of the Lord and confess the God of Israel, but not in truth or right. And I want to replace that word right with righteousness. It's a matter of translation there, but just so you understand what's being said there, it's the idea of truth and righteousness. So Jacob is the nation. Jacob is the whole nation. Israel is the covenant people. Israel is Jacob after he has been touched by the Lord. Israel is the people who received the covenant on Mount Sinai. Israel is the nation that God created to be his people. Judah, who came from the waters of Judah, Judah is the tribe being addressed. So there is within the nation a tribe of Judah. And being good, conscientious Bible students, we know from the book of Genesis that Judah is the tribe from which will come the lion. Judah is the
Lion of
tribe
Judah.
from which will come the king who will reign forever. Judah will produce the king. And David was from the tribe of Judah. And so all of the Davidic kings were from the tribe of Judah. When the nation split into two, the northern kingdom did not have kings from the tribe of Judah. The southern kingdom did. Judah has always, and I think will always, occupy a special place. And so only a prophet from Judah would speak like this and go on to place such an emphasis on the holy city. He says, he's talking now to the tribe of Judah, he says, for they call themselves after the holy city and stay themselves on the God of Israel. The Lord of hosts is his name. Jacob/Israel is in captivity in Babylon. Is that the end of their story? The Lord of hosts here is the Lord Almighty. That's how it's often translated. Sometimes you'll see translations that say Lord of hosts. Sometimes it will say the Lord Almighty. It's always Yahweh Sabaoth. That's the literal translation is the Lord of hosts. He is the Lord of the armies of heaven. And that makes him the Lord Almighty. There is nothing that this God can't do, can't accomplish. The Lord of hosts, the Lord Almighty, is the Redeemer of this people. So he can do what he wants. He can accomplish everything that he wants. Lord is the name of the one who rescued these people from a previous captivity. In Exodus 6:6, he revealed his name as Yahweh. It is Yahweh who is in view here. It is Yahweh who is Yahweh Sabaoth. It is Yahweh, the one who has entered into covenant with these people, who is their God. It is this God, the God of Israel, is the one who covenanted with this people. Who is this? Our question is going to be answered in verses 9 through 11. This is the persevering God. They call themselves after the holy city. They stay themselves on the God of Israel. The Lord of hosts is his name. Former things, we're going to talk about former things and new things in this next little section here. Former things have to be events that are favorable to Israel. The reason I say that is they would not, in verse 5, it attributes the former things to this. They try to attribute these former things to an idol in a favorable way. So the former things are favorable things that have answered, that have happened to Israel. You would not try to attribute to an idol something in your history that was bad. Rather, when you talk about your idol, you want your idol to be the one that rescued you from Egypt or parted the Red Seas or something that, your idol is the reason you had manna every day in the wilderness. So it's a favorable thing. The former things are favorable things. Former things here refer to the Cyrus plan that has just been presented to us. The Cyrus plan is the plan that gets Israel out of Babylon and back to the land. So the former things that we talk about here in this transition chapter, the former things are the Cyrus plan. The new things are going to refer to the servant events, the coming events of the Spirit endowed one who is going to be presented to us as a suffering servant. The Lord himself has used the process of an undated prediction and sudden fulfillment to demonstrate the true deity of the Lord as opposed to the false claims of the idols. So what's going on here in this chapter is that we're going to look at the predictions of the past. We're going to look at particularly the prediction about Cyrus, and we're going to say that has come from the Lord. And we're going to look at things that he has predicted and then brought to pass. And we're going to see that as proof that he is deity. And he's going to say, the Lord is going to say to us, now I'm going to give you something new, and I'm going to give you something new because I want you to understand this is not something that your idol can say to you. This is an event that's unknown previously. This is an event that's not, that there is no history for. And so I'm going to give you something that is absolutely brand new. And when I bring it to pass, not only will your false gods not have predicted it, you'll see clearly that they could not have brought it to pass because they didn't know anything about it. They couldn't have brought it to pass. It was something that just is so, up to this moment in time, has been so hidden that they just, your idols didn't have a prayer in this event. I hope that fleshes out a little more as we go through it. I know that wasn't a very good description of it. The Lord himself is going to use, has used the process of undated prediction and sudden fulfillment to demonstrate the true deity of the Lord, as opposed to the false claims of the idols. Think for a minute about the prediction that Jerusalem would be saved. That Hezekiah, the promise made to Hezekiah that Sennacherib would not be able to overcome Jerusalem. And the fact that when Sennacherib brought his overwhelming army up to lay siege to tiny little Jerusalem, overwhelming army. The army can't begin to fit. There's no hope that you can force all of this army into the space occupied by tiny little Jerusalem. And in that moment, God put to death overnight 185,000 of those soldiers that were out there to besiege Israel. It was such an event that Sennacherib and the Assyrian army literally pulled up their tent pegs and ran for home. They didn't even pretend to want to stay. When they woke up that morning, they packed up and left, period. It was such an overwhelming event.
We must have left a lot of corpses behind.
Yeah, 185,000 of them.
It's almost the number of Russians.
Yeah.
Ukraine.
Isn't that interesting? So God says, I'm going to protect Jerusalem. And then he puts to death 185,000. Which one of your idols has ever accomplished that? Which one of your idols has, let me ask you this question. Which one of your idols has ever made a promise to you? Did he move his mouth when he made the promise? Did he take a deep breath before he spoke to you? Which one of your idols pretended that he knew the future? You've made this idol yourself. You carry it around with you. You nail it down so it doesn't fall over when the door slams. Which one of those things has made a promise to you and kept the promise, brought it to pass in real history. That's what's being said here to these people. I made you promises and brought them to pass in real history. There's no other God that's ever done anything like that, is there? Because there's no other God who can speak. There is no other living God. There is only one God who can not only tell us what's coming, but then work in such a way that it is sure to come to pass. Only one God like that. That's the point. It's pretty striking point. So suddenly means that when the event came to pass, it came with unpredictable suddenness. In other words, it wasn't that he put the 185,000 to death. It wasn't that they all died at the same moment. It wasn't a sudden event. Rather, it was sudden in that it wasn't predicted. When they went to bed that night, they weren't expecting that 185,000 of us aren't going to wake up in the morning. It just came upon them unpredictably. And so it's a picture of time. This precludes someone anticipating the event and attributing it to an idol. Did anybody say, my idol said this was going to happen? They couldn't, could they? Their idol couldn't have predicted it. No one could have predicted it. No one in history would predict that 185,000 soldiers are going to die in one night. Only God can say what's going to happen and then bring it to pass. There's one living God, only one. So the former things I declared of old, former things, that's the Cyrus things. They went out from my mouth and I announced them. Then suddenly I did them and they came to pass. That's what happened with the prediction of saving Jerusalem. And Isaiah and God through Isaiah is now speaking to Israel after Cyrus has come to his throne and he is sending people back to Jerusalem. Put yourself in those shoes and then hear this. The former things I declared of old, they went out from my mouth and I announced them, and then suddenly I did them. Here's Cyrus, and he's sending you home. Isn't that what I said was going to happen? That's what we should read there. Isaiah speaks of the former things as though they had already occurred. No idol was able to predict the Cyrus plan. No idol can say, I'm going to send you Cyrus to send you back to the land. Who is it today that can tell us what's going to happen in Ukraine? And yet God knows precisely what's going to happen in Ukraine, and he is going to bring that to pass. That's going to happen. What will happen will be the Lord's will. I had a friend that came to seminary. I loved that guy from the first moment I met him. Everything about him worshiped God. Everything. I mean, he didn't go anywhere that he didn't find somebody to tell about the Lord or to tell what the Lord was doing in his life today or right now. And from the moment he arrived at seminary, everything that happened to him was bad. The housing that they had for him, they had for two people. And he happened to be the one that they said, we're sorry, we can't put two people in the same housing. We're just sorry. You're going to have to find other housing. His truck broke down. The first day he arrived on campus, his truck broke down. And that's the day I met him. And I went over to help him with the truck. And while we were working on the truck, he was pulling on something under the hood, and his hand slipped and he gashed his hand, and blood was spurting. I mean, he didn't just bleed, blood was spurting, and he ended up in the hospital overnight. He lost so much blood. That's the first day he's on campus. He doesn't have a place to stay overnight, but the Lord provided him a hospital room. And that's what he said to me the next morning. My God is sovereign enough to get me a place to sleep. How can you not love this guy? How can you not love this guy? And every day it got worse. Every day it got worse. And every day it got worse. And finally he came to me and he said, I don't believe the Lord wants me here. I believe the Lord wants me to do his work. I believe the Lord has a place for me in his kingdom. I know the Lord wants me somewhere, but I don't think it's here. And I kept in touch with him for months after he left. And as soon as he left the seminary, everything in his life turned around.
Figure, huh?
Yeah, go figure. Is God able to work in our circumstances? Is God able to work in the day-to-day events that unfold to accomplish his purposes? Sometimes he does it in the way that he did it in my friend's life. Other times you absolutely can't see what the Lord is up to. But because of what happened in his life when he came to the seminary, my friend knew, as he prayed about it and spoke with the Lord, that he was to be somewhere else. And the Lord confirmed that when he left the seminary and went, I don't remember where it was that he went. He went to a church down on the bayou.
Guys, sorry, I have to leave. I love you all and God bless you. Have a great week.
Thanks for being here, Heinz.
Yeah.
As Heinz is indicating, I've used up my time. We'll pick up here in verse 3 next week. Go ahead and read this chapter if you get a chance. Next week. It's a transition chapter from we're going to move from having predicted Cyrus. We're going to move on to predicting the servant. We don't talk about the servant much in this chapter, but we talk about it as the new things that the Lord is going to promise. So if you get a chance, if not, we'll see it hopefully in some depth next week. So we've seen a little scripture this morning. How do we lift up our face and see the world around us?
I can trust those little things that I have to do.
Yeah,
Those little things on the to-do list, you know?
The honey-do list?
Yeah.
I got one of those.
You don't think the Lord would use your wife's voice to speak to you, do you? Isn't it all about trust? Isn't that what we're talking about?
Trust and obey. There's no other way.
Yeah. It's amazing how sometimes those old hymns tell us just everything we need to know.
And that trust is faith.
Interchangeable words.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate everything and enjoy the fellowship with all of you guys. And Bob, thank you again.